Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thanks for joining me today. In today's video, we're finally going to get into Doom Tower. Specifically, the first boss of this rotation, who's a very tricky boss and one of the hardest in all of Doom Tower, and that is Bommel. So we're going to talk about how to get past the very first Bommel and maybe get on up through a few different tiers of Bommel in Doom Tower Normal. And then we're also going to take a look at the very last Bommel, floor 90 of Doom Tower Hard. We're going to talk about a few different solutions that you can use, but I'm really only going to take you through a couple of fights because I don't have every solution built, but we will talk about the other solutions as well as the ones I employ today. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Here we are in Doom Tower Normal, and as you can see, Bommel is the very first boss, and he's one that a lot of players get stuck on. If you are in your first rotation of Doom Tower, meaning you've played less than a month, he may be tricky to get past unless you've gotten lucky with your champion pulls. However, if you're in your second rotation, you should be strong enough to at least get past the first Bommel, and we're going to talk about some different ways to do that. Now, before we get started on an actual team, we should take a look at the boss guide. Bommel has several skills and several passives you're going to have to be aware of. So let's just start at the top. Now, again, for some reason, I don't know why, they put these in reverse order, but the A3 is actually the skill that Bommel usually opens with. So let's read that first. That is Rain of Bombs. So Rain of Bombs removes all buffs from all enemies, then attacks them, places a bomb debuff on each enemy that will detonate after 2 turns, places 1 additional bomb debuff for each buff removed by this skill. The bomb debuffs cannot be blocked or removed. Now, they can't be blocked or removed, but they can be resisted. So resistance can be a strong stat for this fight. If you can resist these bombs, you're going to significantly increase your ability to survive. For the first floor of Bommel, I think that the resistance you need is around 150. So if you can get to that, which is not necessarily super easy early in the game, but if you can get to that with at least 1 or 2 champions, that's going to allow those champions to survive. In addition, when these bombs go off, they have a chance of stunning the target. So if you can resist the bombs, then you resist the stuns, that's going to increase your chance for survival. The A2 here is an AoE that places an HP burn debuff on each enemy for 3 turns. Enemies receive 100% more damage from HP burn debuffs for each bomb debuff they are under. So if you have a lot of bombs on you, the HP burns are going to hit really hard, and they are up for 3 turns. The good news about these HP burns is they can be cleansed, unlike the bombs, which cannot. So you may want to bring a cleanser as well to avoid these HP burns. Alternatively, you can actually block these HP burns as well. So you could use a block debuff buff. That's another option. Finally, the A1 attacks all enemies, decreases bomb debuff detonation countdowns by 1. So if you have bombs up on you because of the Rain of Bombs, those bombs will now be decreased by 1, meaning they're probably going to be automatically set off. Because in the meantime, you've gone. And remember, the bombs are only up for 2 turns. So if Rain of Bombs happens, and then the bombs have not detonated yet, you have to be aware that Ruinous Crash will detonate them. This also instantly activates any HP burn debuffs on each target and decreases the duration of those debuffs by 1 turn. Basically, it just procs the HP burns. And remember, you get more damage, 100% more damage for each bomb debuff you're under. That counts even though those bombs are also being set off by Ruinous Crush. So what we can see here is bringing a lot of buffs on your team can be tricky because when the Rain of Bombs skill is used, that will not only remove the buffs that you're trying to rely on, but it will turn them into bombs that will then damage you. So you want to bring minimal buffs into the team, or you want to find some other way to deal with a lot of bombs. Now, the Dread Minion's skill places a 50% increase attack buff on Bommel for 5 turns. It then summons 2 Dread Bombs and grants an extra turn. Now, the Dread Bombs are actually minions. Those are not debuffs that go on you. Those are minions. They will drop down and flank Bommel. The increase attack buff cannot be removed. Now, it goes up for 5 turns. Then Bommel gets an extra turn, which reduces that duration to 4. However, he is on a 4-turn cycle. He only has 4 skills. So it basically means that the increased attack buff will be up 100% of the time. There is an additional passive effect here, which is very important. Summons 1 Dread Bomb every time Bommel's turn meter is decreased. So turn meter decrease is very dangerous because these Dread Bombs are the most likely reason you're going to die if you've handled all of the other skills. There is one additional passive that's really important here. Summons 1 Dread Bomb every time Bommel's turn meter is decreased. Turn meter decrease on Bommel can be very tricky. So this is a lot like bringing buffs. If you bring a lot of buffs, you're going to get a lot of bomb debuffs. And if you decrease Bommel's turn meter, you're going to get a lot of Dread Bombs dropping down. Either one can end up killing you, so you have to have a way to deal with both of those skills. Now, Bommel has a lot of passives, so let's go ahead and start with Pressure Wave. Each time an enemy places a debuff except a bomb, this places a bomb debuff on that enemy that detonates after 2 turns. It reads weirdly, but what it means is if you debuff Bommel, he hits you back with a bomb. These bomb debuffs cannot be blocked or removed. That's true for all of the bombs in this fight. Each time a bomb debuff detonates on an enemy, meaning you, this has a 25% chance of placing a stun debuff on all other enemies for 1 turn. So if one of your champions has a bomb explode on it, all of the other champions can be stunned for 1 turn. Bommel receives 300% more damage from bomb debuffs. So bringing a bomb champion can be very powerful. Now, what we've already learned is buffs on your team can be tricky, turn meter control can be tricky, and now with this Pressure Wave passive, we find that debuffs can also be tricky. So again, you have to manage this fight very carefully. This is what makes it so hard. First of all, you may not have a ton of champs that do none of those things. And then even if you have champions that do none of those things, you may want to bring champions that do some of these things. And that means you have to account for either getting more bombs from turn meter decrease, like Dread Bombs from turn meter decrease, getting more bombs on yourself from having buffs up and stripped, or if you're placing debuffs, you get bombs that way as well. Finally, for the last 3 passives, these are all of the passives that we associate with Doom Tower bosses. Bommel is immune to every single CC, also all the HP effects. He's also resistant to max HP attacks. That doesn't mean you can't bring in a max HP hitter. It just means that it's not going to do as much damage as normal. And then also here we have all turn meter reduction effects are decreased by 50% when used against the boss. It is possible to use a turn meter decrease team against Bommel, but it's very tricky to do so. And so you're probably not going to do it anyway. And so this almighty persistence isn't incredibly important unless you really, really want to try to make a turn meter reduction team work. Now, there are a few additional tidbits about this fight. One is that Dread Bombs can't be debuffed except with freeze or HP burn. If you freeze them, you will reduce the amount of damage that the Dread Bomb does when it explodes. So bringing a freeze champion in can be very useful. If you do bring in an HP burn champion, the HP burn will proc and damage Bommel. However, this will increase the turn meter of the Dread Bombs. Okay, so it's a very complex fight. Now, what I'm going to do is take you through a very early game team here. Now, all of my champions on this account are pretty much built out. It was hard for me to actually put together a team that would make sense for Bommel on floor 10. What I've been able to do here is basically bring in just level 50 champions, and I hope that this is going to get the job done. Now, if you look at these champions, there are only 2 debuffs. Actually, there are 3 or 4 debuffs available on this team, but the 2 main debuffs are Shield Guard can bring a slow. A slow can be a valuable debuff, and if you have a slow champion that you believe has the HP to survive 1 additional bomb debuff, it can be worth putting that slow on Bommel. Also, my Rector Drath here has a decrease attack on her A1, and decrease attack will reduce not only the direct damage that Bommel does, but the damage that the bomb debuffs do as well. So a decrease attack can be very valuable. Again, you're going to have to survive that extra bomb debuff, so make sure that your champions are tanky enough or bring in enough resist, because if you have a debuffer who has enough resist, you can apply those debuffs safely and your resistance will negate the bomb debuffs that Bommel places on you. I do have a couple of other debuffs available here. There is a heal reduction from Saurus, and I think there is a decreased defense from Gaelic, but I'm not really using either one of those. The decreased defense might be valuable, so I could potentially do that. But in general, I don't need those debuffs in order to get the job done. Another debuff you may want to consider is Weaken. That will allow you to do more damage. And any of those debuffs, again, if you can manage them either with resistance on the debuffer or with just a large enough HP pool and some healing, you can bring in some debuffs, but you don't want to overdo it. As far as turn meter control goes with this team, I have none, so I don't have to worry about decreasing Bommal's turn meter and dropping extra Dread Bomb minions on my team. I have very few buffs on this team as well. Rector Draft does put on a Perfect Veil. Now that Perfect Veil gives me extra mitigations. Buffs are probably the easiest thing to bring into this team. Between turn meter, debuffs, and buffs, buffs are probably the safest because you can manual this fight and time your buffs appropriately. And remember that that skill that he has that removes your buffs and turns them into bombs is on a 3-turn cooldown. So if you have buffs that are only up for 2 turns at a time, usually you can bring those in and get some value out of them. Finally, in this team that I've built, let's go ahead and look at the composition. So I have 2 healing champions. I have Vrask here, who will heal my team with every critical hit. And then I have Rector Drath, who is bringing in a lot of heals as well as a revive. A reviver can be a really good idea. You want your reviver to be very tanky, but in general, because bombs ignore defense, you want to go with HP tankiness. Build a large health pool, build a lot of healing, and go in that direction, as opposed to bringing in champions that are defensive based. Now, I actually probably have a better aura here. I could bring in Rector Drath to give me a resist aura in Doom Tower, but I didn't want to do that because not everybody is going to have Rector Drath. So I'm instead going to put Gaelic here with the extra HP aura in the lead. You can do this with pretty much any healers that you have available. I do think Rector Drath is one of the best in the game, but you could get this done with Apothecary. You could get this done with Painkeeper. You could get this done with a lot of other healers, Doom Priest. So think about the healers that you have, and as long as you have some solid healing and some large HP pools, you should be okay. The other thing I'm bringing is just a ton of damage. I want to make sure that I don't go past 2 turns on the boss for floor 10. Basically, what's going to happen is the Dread Bombs are going to go off and probably come close to killing my entire team, and I'm not going to have enough healing to get all the way back and take a second round of Dread Bombs. So the healing is there to allow me to survive the little bomb debuffs that hit my champions individually, but 2 rounds of Dread Bombs will probably be too much for this team. I've also chosen damage dealers who can do good wave clear, so both Shield Guard and Saurus are really good wave clear, and you'll notice I've primarily stayed away from weak affinity champions other than my Gaelic, but I figured everybody is going to be using their starter champion on floor 10, and so that's why he's here. Okay, so that's it. Finally, let's go ahead and actually try out the fight. Now I'm going to let this fight run on auto for a little bit. The team should be fine getting through the waves, but as I get into the second wave, I'm actually going to take auto off, and I'm going to do this manually. And the reason I want to do that is I want to make sure I have my cooldowns up when I reach the boss. So you want to go ahead and A1 cycle for the second wave here. But as you can see, every time Vrask hits, if he crits, he heals his teammates. And so I do believe I have 100% crit rate on this Vrask, or it might be like 90%. But so he does some decent healing here as well as Rector Drath. Again, A1 cycle your skills so you have all of your cooldowns available here for Bommel. Now, when you start, you'll notice, first of all, I brought a shield set in. That's probably not the best option because that is a buff that Bommel is going to strip off of me on the first turn. So what I'm going to do here is I don't want to just auto battle this. I want to go ahead and A1 cycle here because I don't want to bring up any buffs or debuffs except for maybe a decrease attack from Rector Drath. So she didn't land it, but now we're just going to go ahead and attack with everybody's A1. There we got the slow debuff out there, which is actually pretty good. And again, now we have some bombs on our champions, but they should be strong enough to survive these. Now the Dread Bombs are going to be tricky. I'm going to wait 1 turn for Rector Drath to put up my Perfect Veil, because my Perfect Veil will actually give me a 15% damage mitigation, and that'll help me survive against the Dread Bombs. So for right now, I'm just going to keep hitting the boss. Now you'll notice I used the ability that gave Gaelic increased speed here. Remember that this skill up here, Rain of Bombs, is the skill that removes all of my buffs. So I have 2 turns or 3 turns now to actually use my buffs. So this is a good opportunity to get value out of any buffs that I have. Decrease attack landed. Let's get the slow out there again if we can. We cannot. Now you have to watch the timer on the Dread Bombs. They move more slowly than Bommal's turn meter. So I want to save my mitigations for as close as I can to that Dread Bomb going off. I think I'm going to get one more round, so I'm going to try it. Okay, so now you can see that the Dread Bombs look like they have full turn meter for a very long time. I don't know why that happens. Clearly, they could have gone off earlier, but they always seem to delay an extra 2 or 3 champions. It's very frustrating because it makes it hard to properly time your buffs, but I've been playing a lot of Bommel over the last few hours, so I've been used to it. I've been seeing it a lot, trying to get ready for this video. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use my heal from Rector Drath. So not only is everybody going to be healed, but they have that Perfect Veil when the Dread Bombs go off, and that keeps everybody alive. Now, hopefully, Vrask will be able to heal me up, and as will Rector Drath, and I will continue to be able to fight this fight. The decreased attack and the slow are both very useful. You'll notice that I believe my Shield Guard has enough resistance that he doesn't get the debuff, the bomb debuff, and that's also true of my Rector Drath. They both have about 150 resistance. So this team probably could have made it through an extra round of Dread Bombs, but it doesn't look like we're going to have to worry about it. And there we go. So floor 10, Dreadhorn down. I did manual it. This is probably a team that could auto it, but if you're going to auto your team for Bommel, make sure that you do 2 things. One is you want to A1 cycle on round 2. So you can have your openers, but make sure that you just use them once and then go ahead and force the A1 cycle right there. And then when you open with Bommel, make sure that you don't use a bunch of buffs and debuffs before he goes first, especially buffs. Don't use any buffs until the Bommel goes, the Dreadhorn goes 1 time. So you want to open with your A1s and then let Bommel go ahead and remove any buffs that you have, which you won't have any. Then you can put your buffs up and get use out of them. So make sure that if you're going to try to auto Bommel, you use the AI appropriate. Okay, so I just wanted to mention a couple of early game Bommel solutions that you could potentially find. One of them is a Dwarven champion who is a rare actually, and his name is Master Butcher. So that's this champion right here. Okay, now Master Butcher is probably the best and cheapest early game Bommel solution, and it is because of this passive right here. When attacked, heals all allies equal to the amount of damage taken. This is on a 1-turn cooldown. Now you'll notice that this does not work against bosses, but it works against the Dread Bombs because the Dread Bombs count as minions. They aren't the boss. So what that means is when the Dread Bomb goes off, at least the first one, everyone will take damage and then everyone will get healed by that full amount. The second Dread Bomb will often kill Master Butcher, but if you can keep him alive, then it will potentially work again on the second round of Dread Bombs. So he's a very cheap option to build. Make sure you book him out. So this is on a 1-turn cooldown, and then build him with a bunch of HP. Also, if you can, get a bunch of resist on him so he doesn't take damage from the actual debuff bombs, because that would proc this ability and put it on cooldown. And then when the dread bombs go off, you wouldn't have this available. So he needs to have high resist and high HP, and then enough speed to make it worthwhile. Now, he does bring a provoke. He has some buffs as well here, increase crit rate and increase attack. So you have to watch out for this skill. You don't want to place buffs on your team necessarily. You can try using it. You can also switch it off in the AI if you don't want it. Now, Master Butcher does max out, even if you took him to 6 stars, which apparently some people like to do for Hydra boss. He will max out on Bommel, and he will not be your permanent Bommel solution all the way up to floor 90 of Hard Doom Tower. So there are better solutions for that. I'm going to mention 2 more when we get to that floor. Okay, so here we are, Doom Tower hard mode. Now, this was really interesting for me today because I had the one-shot Bommel team. YST designed a one-shot Bommel team using Nishak and Ally Attack earlier this year. And I had the team, so I made it, and it worked probably about 75% of the time, maybe 60% of the time, but it worked quite often, and so it was a really easy Bommel solution for me and really fun. However, I broke that team when I was making a new clan boss team recently, and so I can no longer use that solution. I was going to use a different solution. There is a solo champion that can solo this, and I am building that right now. I'll talk about her in just a minute. But she's not quite ready yet. So for today's video, I had to find a completely different solution. Now, there are a number of Bommel solutions. So once you get to this point in the game, you should have some champions available who will present you with a Bommel solution. In this particular case, I'm using a combination of a few things, but the primary solution that I'm using is block damage. If you can block damage and time it right so that you can block the dread bomb damage, and you can potentially use something to mitigate or block the bomb debuff damage, then you basically approach this like an unkillable clan boss team. If you can't be killed by the bombs and by the dread bombs, then it doesn't matter how long it takes for you to kill Dreadhorn. You can go as long as you want. And that's what I've done here. I've just put together a team that I think will work. It's going to be a little bit tricky, but I'm going to run you through these champions so you can see what I'm trying to do. So the first champion here is Mighty Uko. Mighty Uko brings a nice ally speed in all battles aura of 20%. On the A1, Mighty Uko also has a decrease attack. So I should have a very consistent decrease attack out there for Bommel. That's one of the debuffs that I think is very valuable. It's going to reduce my overall damage on the bomb debuffs. And the reason I need to do that is because I'm not sure that Helicath's block damage is going to be up as frequently as it would need to be to prevent the bomb damage and the dread bomb damage. Now, Helicath has that block damage on a 4-turn cooldown. It's up for 2 turns. That should be enough to prevent the dread bombs from wiping my team out. Cardiel and Pythion here are both healers. They both have a block debuffs buff. They both have a cleanse. So I'm going to be able to remove any stuns that those bombs drop on my team, hopefully. Also, I'm going to have plenty of heals to get my team back up to full health before the next round of bombs comes down. Finally, I have Shiramani here. She is a 100% AoE freeze champion. She also has a nice big heal, so she's going to help with a little bit of the healing. She's also going to freeze those dread bombs for me, which are going to reduce the amount of damage that they do. Now, it may seem strange to bring in a freeze champion and a block damage champion to handle the dread bombs, but I'm not sure that I can time it perfectly every time. And these champions may be able to survive at least 2 dread bombs based on their general tankiness. If someone dies, I have 3 ways to bring them back. Cardiel has a revive on death that can't be removed. And then Uko and Pythion both have AoE revives. So I have a lot of survivability here. I have very little damage, so it's going to take a while to do this. And I am actually going to manual this fight because I'm not sure it would work on auto. In fact, I'm pretty sure it would not work on auto. But that's okay. Sometimes when you get to this floor, all you're trying to do is get past it and keep moving up the Doom Tower. And so that's how I'm approaching this today. I've already completed the Doom Tower this month on both normal and hard. There are only a few days left in this rotation. But if I were trying to get as high up in Doom Tower as I could, I usually just do Bommel once and skip on past him because I would rather farm Dark Fae for the materials for the forge. All right, let's get into this and see what happens with this team. All right, so what I'm going to do is just let this fight start on auto. I don't have to worry about the first wave. Even though I don't have a lot of damage dealers, this wave should die pretty quickly. The waves in the boss floors are actually a lot easier than the waves outside the boss floors, like in the other floors. So usually you can just chew through these floors without too much difficulty. On the second wave, I am going to want to A1 cycle so that I have all of my cooldowns available when I start the Bommel fight. However, remember that in the Bommel fight, usually for the first turn, you're going to just use A1s because you don't want to get any turn meter on the control on the boss. You don't want to debuff him, and you don't want to put up any buffs on your own team. So for the first turn, at least you're going to use A1s again. So you do have a little bit of extra leeway when you A1 cycle here at the end of wave 2, because you're probably going to get an extra wave, or I'm sorry, an extra round of A1s on the boss himself. Sometimes you make a mistake in like Dark Fae and you haven't A1 cycled properly, and that's the end of your run. But in Bommel's case, it's a little bit more forgiving. Okay, so as we get close here, I'm just going to go ahead and A1 cycle on my own and just finish off this wave and make sure I have my cooldowns available. Okay, here we are at Dreadhorn. Now, this fight is tricky. You have to... I'm going to manual this fight because basically I can't miss a single buff or debuff at the right time. Basically my buffs. So you have to really know the speed of your champions and what's going to happen in the fight. So remember that during that first ability, Bommel is going to remove any buffs that my team has. So I don't want to use them now. So I'm just going to go ahead and A1 cycle. That weaken is going to be helpful. Helicath will take a bomb. That won't be a problem. In addition, I'd like to land the decrease attack from Uko, but that didn't happen, unfortunately. Now, these bomb debuffs are important to understand. Remember that the bomb debuff ticks at the beginning of your champion's turn. So if it has a 2-turn duration, that means your champion will only get 1 turn before it goes off. So if you have a champion like here, I have a Helicath who has a shield. Now bombs will hit shields, so that shield could help my team survive. That means I want to use it on this turn, because on Helicath's second turn, he won't be able to put up the shield before the bomb goes off on himself. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and use his shield ability. In addition, when those bombs go off, they have a chance of stunning the entire team. So likewise here with Pythion skill, I'm going to put up the block debuffs buff. You'll notice that some of them are protected. That's because I have a protection set on Pythion. All right, I landed the decrease attack, which is nice. And then now that Bommel's A3 is down here, this is the ability that removes the buffs from my team. I can go ahead and actually use abilities that have buffs on them. So I'm going to use Cardiel's ally attack here, which gives me some buffs. Now I've come around to Shiramani. I want her to use her AoE freeze. I don't want to use my block damage buff yet for Helicath for 2 reasons. One is that these dread bombs are very slow, so they're not going to hit me for a while. And the second reason is that this rain of bomb skills will come back around and potentially remove my block damage buff. So I have to wait for that to actually happen before I put it up. Now, just to make sure that I have that skill available at the right time, I'm going to use Uko's revive here. Now, obviously, it doesn't revive anybody because nobody's dead, but it will place an increased speed buff. So I just want to get a little bit ahead of those dread bombs. I'm going to use Shiramani's heal to make sure everybody's nice and healed up. And now again, I'm going to put up my second block debuffs buff here so that nobody gets stunned and it doesn't break my turn order. Now buffs should start dropping off of me this turn, which is good because Bommel's about to remove them and put bombs on me for each of those buffs. So the fewer buffs I have, the fewer bombs I get. Okay, that wasn't too bad. All right, so I was behind one of those dread bombs. I'm hoping I'm ahead of the second or I'm going to be in trouble. I am in front of the second, so I'm going to put that block damage buff up now. And I'm actually also going to put up my block debuffs to prevent the stuns that are coming from those bombs on the next turn. Let's get that heal out. Use my ally attack now. That might have been bad timing. Now I have a lot of bomb debuffs out there. So I'm going to want to find some way to deal with this. Somehow I missed my rotation with Helicath. I don't know exactly how that happened, but I'm going to go ahead and put out my revive on death here. So this might be enough to keep me alive. Also, I'm going to use my shield. That might be enough to keep me alive. And then I'm going to try to heal as much as possible. So that hurt, but I'm still in the running because I have so much healing. And now Helicath is back to his ability, so I'm going to put that up now. His block damage. There go the Dread Bombs. And this time, the Dread Bombs do no damage whatsoever. Bommel will strip these buffs off of me and make me pay for them. And there we go. So that's the cycle. And again, this is why I'm manualing the fight, because I need to make sure that I always have those buffs up at the right time. But you can, in fact, create a Bommel auto team. You just have to be really careful about your speed tune. So it may take a while for you to understand how to speed tune your Bommel team. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and manual this the rest of the way. You can watch the fight if you want, and then we'll talk a little bit more at the end about alternative solutions. Okay, so there it is. That took a while. You can see over 11 minutes, 214 turns. Actually, the run that I originally started on, I did catch a bad stun at the wrong time and I died and I had to replay the level. So just full disclosure, these are not 100%, and one of the reasons that they're not is because you can't control the RNG of the debuffs, the bombs, the stuns, so on and so forth. But I was able to get it done. And there it is, floor 90 of the Dreadhorn down, and I can continue moving on. So now I did want to mention just a few other solutions for Bommel. Vogoth is one of the best and one of the most well-known. So he has a passive very much like Master Butcher. Whenever this champion is attacked, heals all allies by 50% of the damage received. That does include himself, by the way. He heals himself by 50% of the damage received. Now, this only heals by 25% of the damage received from bosses, but again, the Dread Bombs are minions, so they count as the full 50% heal. Now, one of the things that you can do here is you can build a Vogoth along with a bunch of other things that we've used today, whether that is block damage or unkillable, or you can use shields to mitigate some damage. You can obviously use high resist. We've talked about that. So there are a bunch of things that you can do. And then you can throw Vogoth onto the team, and that will help you survive those Dread Bombs. If Vogoth dies to a Dread Bomb, then that's it. Then you don't get the heal for the rest of your team, and your team is going to die. So make sure that you build Vogoth with a lot of resist, a big HP pool, and then get to the right speed that you need for the team to work. There's an even simpler way, which is you can build 2 Vogoths up to level 60, and then they will heal each other, and that basically makes you immune to the Dread Bomb damage. As long as nobody dies, your team will be healed up full. Now, as a free-to-play player, I started to go down that route, and then I thought twice about it. I built a Vogoth to 60. He was able to, by himself, get me past several floors of Bommel. And then as I got into the end game, I started thinking about other solutions. And so I made my one-shot Nishak team, and that worked great. However, now there is a very, very good, simple free-to-play solution that I highly recommend you go after if you ever pull this champion. And that is Lady Annabelle. She can solo every single floor of Bommel. You will need very good gear on her, but by the time you're looking at floor 90 in Doom Tower Hard, you should have the gear that you need. Now, as you can see, mine isn't yet built. I am still working on my final masteries for my Lady Annabelle. I wanted to have her ready for this video, but I'll have to make a second video out of the Lady Annabelle solo. For right now, just take a look at her kit. She heals herself on her A1, so that's a nice passive heal. She also places a leech debuff, which is going to give her even more healing. She also does have a 100% chance of placing that decreased speed. This only applies on targets with less than a 50% turn meter, so you want to make sure that you appropriately time this particular skill, but getting that decreased speed out there can be very helpful. The A3 doesn't actually play very much other than that she can place a speed buff on herself. I don't know if you need this. You can probably turn this off. Lady Annabelle also has this passive. Heals this champion by 50% of their max HP whenever an ally or an enemy dies. So dread bombs are enemies, and when they explode, they die, which means that she's going to heal herself when the dread bomb goes off. So as long as you can keep her alive through the first dread bomb and then the second one, so I guess the percentage would be you'd need under 75% damage, right? Because if you took, say, 75% damage, you're going to heal yourself by 50% of her max HP. So let's say you get down to 30. Let's say you take 70%, that takes you down to 30. That would heal you back to 80%. And then you would take 70% again. That would get her down to 10%. As long as you have her in a regen set and she can get her attacks off to heal herself a little bit, hopefully Bommel can't kill you off in the meantime, and you can start to heal back up for the next set of dread bombs. Obviously, the less damage you take, the bigger her HP pool is, the healthier she's going to be, and the more likely you are to survive that attack. Now, Lady Annabelle takes a very long time to clear Bommel, but she is the cheapest and best reliable solution for all of the Bommel floors. So if you have her right now, you can probably clear the first floor of Bommel with her at 40 or 50, and then you can just run her up as your permanent Bommel solution all the way through Doom Tower Hard floor 90. You can see I don't have my blessing on her yet. I also don't have my masteries on her yet, but depending on how your regen sets are in terms of strength, in terms of speed and things like that, you can go in different routes with this. So you could certainly go with like a Phantom Touch in order to get more damage on the Bommel, or you could go with a defensive based blessing that's going to give you more HP, and that's going to allow you to regen more health. So there are a lot of different ways that you could go with the blessings and also with the masteries. But once I build her out and I actually figure that out for my Lady Annabelle, I'll make sure to put out a video on her soon. Okay, so that is it for Bommel and the Doom Tower today. Just a quick reminder, you don't need any of the champions that I've run today. You just have to be really aware of the different mechanics of the boss fight. So know that bringing buffs can result in you getting more bomb debuffs. Know that turn meter can result in extra dread bombs, and know that anytime you place a debuff on the boss, you're going to get more bomb debuffs on any of your debuffers. So build your champions and your composition accordingly, and you should be able to move up through the floors with Bommel. He is a very tricky boss, but once you get him handled, you're going to be able to move on up through Doom Tower. So unless you need to farm him for some reason, which most of the time you don't, really just put together a team that you can manual him once and get past him and start going looking for better targets. Okay, that is it for this video. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button or subscribe to the channel. Also consider joining our Discord community. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Colred. I will see you in another video soon.